everyone, and welcome back to another College Chaps podcast. Well, it's the end of week two, about to embark on week three. We've been very lucky to have a number of great guests, but we thought, given that we've had 3 weeks of football, we might want to take a look at what's been happening and get the expert opinion from our expert panel. Speaking of which, we are the College Chaps. I'm George. I'm joined by the dynamic duo of Oliver and Alex. How are you both?
We're dynamic. That's how we are, George.
And the
Alex is
expert.
nearly. Well, I don't know about expert. Let's not get carried away. Alex is almost falling asleep. I followed up a weekend of staying up to watch football on Saturday night with a night of staying up painting and decorating last night. So I'm not quite sure how dynamic we are between the two of us, but lots of exciting college football stuff to talk about, which will always get us up and out of our seats.
It could be worse, Ollie. We could have paid $1.4 million just to get embarrassed in our own backyard. Although,
I do, I do that. I do that for free, AC. To be
some
honest.
people like that kind of thing. They like paying to be embarrassed by someone much smaller than them in their own backyard. So, you know,
Well, we might get onto that in due course, to be perfectly honest. So this is the What I've Really Earned So Far episode, and it's a mixed bag, isn't it, chaps? There's been a lot that's happened, and I think okay, week zero was a limited schedule, but certainly in the 3 weeks that we've had so far, it's been pretty eye-opening to be perfectly honest. So let's start. Let's quickly go around the conferences because we're going to delve into some of the teams individually, but let's quickly go around the conferences. Start with the Big Ten, much expanded Big Ten. How do we think they've fared so far?
I think it's. Excuse me. I think it's for the Big Ten. I think it's very much for me anyway. I think it's what we expected, and we'll get into the levels of what that actually looks like for each teams. But Ohio State look brilliant. They've not had to play any serious contenders of yet, but Ohio State look exactly what we anticipated out of them. Jeremiah Smith is, I don't remember a true freshman this early on at wide receiver being looking as incredible as Jeremiah Smith has had. And again, you've got to weigh that against the opposition that they face. But everything that we thought about Ohio State coming into this season is what we presumed it was. We're going to dive into that, but we expect them to be at the top of the Big Ten. We expected Oregon to be up there, and we'll get into what that looks like. We've expected, Michigan might have some struggles. We'll get into what that looks like. And I just think that for the Big Ten, it has been pretty much business as usual, apart from one team, I think. And I don't think anyone expected USC to be as good as they've been so early on in this season. So I think the Big Ten is business as usual, for sure, and kind of what we expected out of them, despite the expansion. There's a very noticeable gulf in class between the top and the bottom and the middle, even. And I think that's kind of one of the things that you would expect out of the Big Ten.
yeah, I think you nailed it. Ohio State could be through week four without conceding a touchdown, given that they're on a bye this upcoming week and then they have Marshall in week four. That's quite scary. Oregon, I think they've flattered to deceive a little bit, but they've had tougher games than people will give them credit for. Yes, I'd like to see them a little bit better. I'd like to see them making a few fewer mistakes. Um, but also, Boise are not an easy team to play against. And I feel like Oregon is a team that's going to get going a little bit more as this year goes on in the Big Ten. I also think Penn State have come through two tough games early on in the year. And I know we don't rate them particularly highly, but I feel like Penn State of the last few years would have lost at least one of those first two games in the way that they've gone.
Okay, so this will shape our conversation for the next 20 minutes or so. But the SEC mixed bag from the SEC so far.
Yeah, I think it's come across as a conference that's probably not quite as dominant as people think it is at the lower end. I think the top end, absolutely. I think if you had to pick a national championship favourite. Probably 4 of the top 5 teams are coming out of the SEC right now. You look at Ohio State coming in there, but you're looking still at Georgia, at Alabama, at Texas as teams that are going to win a national championship. So yeah, the SEC has not fallen off in terms of talent, but the lower end is probably not where people expected it to be. Florida suck, LSU lost to USC in week one, Texas A&M are shite. And like Oklahoma are probably a nice surprise for the SEC. They come in, they're 2-0. Again, not really played anyone that tough yet. I think the SEC will start cannibalizing itself when league play starts, truly. But there's no one 0-2 in the SEC. So it's not like they've had a horrendous start.
Give Auburn time. Ollie, just quickly on the SEC thoughts.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, lots of strong teams. Over half of the teams still unbeaten after the first 2 weeks of football. Vanderbilt, unbeaten. Who'd have had Vanderbilt being unbeaten through 2 weeks? I think that was awesome for the conference. I think, the SEC is going to be. It's a hard conference to play football in this year if you're in the SEC. It's a hard conference to play against if you're outside of the SEC. I think that's the best way of looking at that conference, and the fact that 6 of the top 7 teams in the most recently released AP poll are from the SEC, the first time in the 88-year history of that ranking, says something about this conference. And again, similar to the Big Ten, not unexpected. You expect the SEC to be at the forefront. Those 2 conferences, in fact, you expect to be at the forefront. And you remove the anomaly of the Pac-12 having both of their teams unbeaten, and the Big Ten's got the highest unbeaten percentage, and the SEC sneaks in not far behind it. So, kind of what you expect from those 2 conferences, really.
I'm glad you brought up the position in the AP poll. But Alex makes a very good point that probably from next week onwards, conference play really does play a part, which I think is, we'll talk about this in a second, but I think is the really interesting part about it, that even if you're Notre Dame, technically, you're still not out of it. But I think there is the ability now to recover from maybe an early season defeat. But and we're all laughing at that. Technically, let's just round up quickly on the conferences. The Big 12 and the ACC, because it strikes me that the Big 12 has probably made much more of a splash in the ACC. But you may disagree with that, Ollie.
No, I think you look at the ACC, and that's a conference where I think we talked about it, when we've been messaging each other over the first 2 weeks, is very much you don't know who's good and who isn't at the moment across college football in a lot of respects after 2 weeks. And I think the ACC is the case in point. Is you don't know who's good in the ACC because Clemson looked awful against Georgia, then absolutely smashed App State, who are a good Group of 5 team. Let's not beat around the bush. App State are a team that should have been contending for the college football playoff, and Clemson spanked them off the park. So we don't know if Clemson are good. We don't know if FSU are good. We thought Georgia Tech were good. They lost to Syracuse. We don't know if Syracuse are that good. You can run down the whole gamut of the ACC, and you still don't really know who's good and who isn't in that conference. Whereas the Big 12, I think, is a little bit clearer of who is and who isn't good. Houston isn't good. Arizona are good. Oklahoma State are. We don't know. After that game against Arkansas, they looked awful, and then they came back to win. I think the Big 12, there's the picture that there's still a number of teams that can contend, and we thought that beforehand. I think the clearer picture of who is good and who is not so good in that conference compared to the ACC. But I still think it's a wide open conference, and interesting with some of the schedule quirks there. Like we saw Utah Baylor this last weekend, wasn't a conference game, and you kind of tripping each other up already without playing conference games. And Arizona and Kansas State will do the same thing this Friday night. 2 Big 12 teams that play each other out of conference, which kind of does and doesn't help your cause depending on how you look at it. But yeah, I think there's certainly a more of a clear picture with the Big 12 than there is the ACC.
Yeah, Big 12's interesting. Houston might go winless if they don't beat Rice this weekend, they're going winless. Like, and that's an awful look for them. Colorado are awful, which brings me no joy whatsoever to see them not be very good. I think Iowa State averaging 20 plus points a game is incredible for this conference. Like the only team who isn't averaging 20 plus points a game in this conference is Houston. They haven't even scored 20 points on the year, which tells you kind of just how far below everyone else in this conference that they are. I think there's five really good teams in this conference. I think there's really good, as in really good for the Big 12, not really good in the world of college football. I don't think there's one very good team in this conference. I think it's going to be a really interesting watch and a really interesting dogfight to see who wins the conference. In the ACC, I think Miami have had the best start to the year so far. Obviously, boat raced Florida in week one, beat Florida A&M comfortably as you'd expect this weekend. Obviously, there's some far bigger tests to come for them, but they obviously don't face Clemson in conference play, which means it's probably saved for the championship game. Um, which is an interesting quirk for them. I think, there's a very, very good chance that they get to the ACC championship game undefeated, and we could be seeing a little bit of a Hurricanes revival as long as they don't shit the bed somewhere, which Miami has had a problem with doing in the past, 15, 20 years. So, we just need to not see history repeat itself for once, which is interesting.
I think Miami's a really good example of what we've seen so far, but I think people just don't have the faith that they're going to continue on that. Running up the schedule in front of me, but I think as bad as Florida are, to be able to go into the swamp and get that result, I think was really good for Miami. We knew the Florida schedule was horrendous, but the Miami game was the one that they thought was winnable to give them a bit of momentum. And then we know how Florida have fared since then. I don't want to spend too much time talking about teams that are at the top of the tree, but Alex, given you've talked about Ohio State, or maybe it was Ollie talked about Ohio State, and how well placed they are to go unbeaten for the rest of the season. You did talk about the cannibalization of the SEC. How well do you think Texas is going to do in the SEC? Can Texas be unbeaten this season? I guess the big game for them is the Georgia game.
Yeah, I mean, they have to beat Georgia twice to go unbeaten going into the playoff, which I don't think is going to happen. Yeah, to win a national for this Texas team to win a national championship undefeated, they're going to have to beat Georgia three times, and that just doesn't happen. This year, a loss is coming at some point to that Georgia team, but I also think they're good enough to beat Georgia in one of these games as well. So, they're going to get the better of them at some point. The game at DKR, maybe that's where they get the better of them. Maybe Georgia beats them in the championship game, and hopefully we get to see the third in that trilogy in the national championship game later on down the line. Like I don't see anyone else on this schedule for Texas that can beat them. Yeah, maybe Oklahoma, that game's always a toss up. But right now, I think Texas is comfortably better than Oklahoma right now. I think they should go into every game, probably apart from that Georgia game, thinking we should dominate this team. The Georgia game is a toss up. I don't think it's going to affect whether either of those teams make the college football playoff. I think Georgia right now are probably the most impressive team in college football again, and they're going to go under the radar because they're impressive again, and they've been impressive for the last 3 years. Um, and I think that's something that people are going to get almost. They're not going to talk about Georgia because they're tired of them being good. It's not new. It's something that we're used to right now. We always used to have this with Alabama teams, and they'd get to the SEC championship game, and no one would have been talking about how good they were all year, and then they'd go and boat race whoever they face in that matchup. So, I think Georgia are still the clear favorite for me in the SEC. I think Texas is the next kind of team off the block there right now. I think Alabama's right up there as well. I think those three are kind of clear of everyone else right now at the top of the SEC.
Um, Ollie, just to jump about a little bit, what have you thought of Tennessee thus far? Because Alex mentions three teams in the SEC. Tennessee tonight ranked number 4. I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that because I think they have been quite impressive this year. And what strikes me, just looking at the schedules, it's impossible for Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee to go unbeaten this season because they'll play each other. So, what do you think of Tennessee thus far?
Let's just spare a thought for the SEC being the Pac-12's replacement. We never thought we were going to have the cannibalization that the Pac-12 used to give us on a Friday night. The SEC is going to start giving it us on a Saturday afternoon. I really like Tennessee. I really like what they've done this year so far. And it starts with the redshirt freshman quarterback, Nico. I'm going to butcher his surname because I'm going to pronounce it I am a leader because I just think it sounds great as it is, but it's actually pronounced far more Hawaiian than that.
Maliava.
Yeah, it's pronounced far more
Yeah,
Hawaiian. It's pronounced far more Hawaiian than I'm ever going to pronounce it. So I'm a leader with this. That kid is special, and I think this is where it starts for Tennessee. They've had a couple of decent quarterbacks in recent years. Joe Milton was a decent college quarterback, not great or even good, but a decent one. Hendon Hooker was a decent but not great college quarterback. Tennessee now has a great college football quarterback and a great future professional quarterback as well. For a kid of his age to come in, you saw it at the back end of the season in the bowl game how he performed in that game, and he's just come into this season and he's absolutely grabbed the Josh Heupel offense by the horns, and that team looks awesome on offense. They look strong on defense. And I think they're as legitimate a contender in the SEC as they've ever been. Now, as you guys rightly said, Georgia, Texas, right at the very top. Ole Miss is a team that's there or thereabouts. We don't know what LSU is. I don't think Brian Kelly knows what LSU is. So it's right there for Tennessee to be a college football playoff team this year because the SEC is likely to place, I think, 4 teams in the college football playoff. And where they're at right now, there's no reason why they can't be a contender. They've got all the pieces, and it starts at the quarterback position.
I think it's a year too soon for me. I agree. I think the highs of Tennessee right now are college football playoff worthy, but also I look at a redshirt freshman, a young kid at quarterback who threw 2 interceptions against NC State, who are not great. I know obviously they beat the tar out of NC State in that game. What's he going to do against this Georgia defense? What's he going to do against this Texas defense, who, especially the Texas defense, came to the big house and created takeaways? And I think that could be the killer for Tennessee in some of these big games. I think they're going to have the opportunity to go out and absolutely blow some teams away this year, and it's going to be a really fun year to be a Tennessee football fan. But I just think it's a year too soon, and he'll need to show some maturity at quarterback. And I think if they can get to that point, then great. But you've got OU on the schedule, you've got Georgia on the schedule, you've got Alabama on the schedule. I think to win all 3 of those or even win 2 of those and be in contention is going to be really tough.
But you look at the road games they've got, and they could be at the end of the season a one-loss team.
100%.
I
They
think
could be a one-loss team.
And it's where those games fall, right? So I absolutely agree with your point, Alex, that there's some incredibly tough games for him to face as a quarterback. The NC State defense is the better part of that NC State team. Let's be honest. But when those games fall and how he develops through the year is going to be key to whether they realise the highs, as we've said. The high is that potential playoff place. That development as the year progresses it is going to be key to how it pans out for Tennessee. But like we both said, all three of us said, it's an exciting time to be a Tennessee fan, and there's no doubt of.
I think we're going to find out quite quickly. Actually, we're going to find out because they've got the back-to-back road games. They've got Oklahoma and then Arkansas, and I think both of those are difficult places to go, irrespective of what you think of Arkansas. Just and I think Arkansas are a better team than we we saw on Saturday. There's no way they should have lost that game, and Sam Pittman said as much, right? That the offense really let them down. But anyway, so I think we're going to find out quite quickly. I'm quite high on Tennessee, to be perfectly honest. Can we circle back to Oregon, please? Because Alex said that he had quite liked what he'd seen, and I've been quite underwhelmed by what I've seen thus far. So the truth is maybe perhaps somewhere in the middle, but what are we? I expected more from Oregon at this stage. I appreciate it's a team which has kind of rebuilt itself a little, but I think I expected a bit more.
They've had probably the most lose-lose schedule of the first 2 weeks of any team. Right, you go in and if you beat the doors off of Idaho and Boise, everyone goes, "Yeah, but you're Oregon. We're expecting you to do that." In two teams that know how to play football, that know their identity, that know kind of how to cause trouble. Boise are always going to be able to score against you. Is it Genty, the running back's potentially the best player in the country, right? And he went off for almost 200 yards, and he's going to do that against teams because dude's special, right? 267 yards in his first game of the year. I know, obviously, it's against Georgia Southern. It's not against a great team, but that kid is unreal. And that was obviously going to be a boat race, and I think the fact that Dylan Gabriel looked poised, he didn't give the ball away. Oregon just kind of eased their way into that one. They had to score late. They had to come from behind, and I think that the Idaho game in week one is always a tough one. That's as I say, it's a good football team who kind of know how to play tough, hard-nosed football. Yeah, Oregon were never really in any kind of risk in that one. Yeah, they were able to move the ball almost at will. They just couldn't kind of score in that one. So I think they're a team that's going to get better throughout the year. Whether I love what they're able to do in the cold in the Big Ten towards the end of the year, I don't know. I don't think they're on a level with Ohio State, but I don't think anyone is on a level with Ohio State in that division, right? And it's tough for Oregon, but you look at their schedule, and I think Michigan's a team that they can beat in their still a ranked team. Ohio State's probably the only game in there that I don't back them to go and win over the rest of the schedule. So I still like them as a team that can go out and contend for this Big Ten title.
Just talking quickly about Michigan, with Texas, as we all think, go on and have a resounding season. That's not a bad loss then for Michigan as such. I mean, I know that the scoreline was somewhat decisive, but it's not a bad loss in that respect, is it?
So no, for me, I think Texas. I think this game, and people will groan when I say this, but I think this game tells us more about Texas than it does Michigan. I think the Texas staff game planned so well for Michigan. They caught this Michigan team is nowhere near as deep as it was last year when they won a national championship, right? And Texas knew when you catch them with those two big defensive tackles on the field, you play fast, you get the ball into space, you let your playmakers do the work. As soon as those two big defensive tackles get rotated out of the off the field, that's when we run, and we run right at them. And then when they're on the field, if we need to run, we run outside, and they executed that brilliantly offensively. Michigan playing from behind is never easy, especially when you're in this kind of offense that likes to control the ball, that likes to run a lot. they had to put the ball up there, and there were takeaways that um, obviously hurt them as well. So, that side of things, it was a rough day for Michigan, but I don't think it was. I don't think they're as bad as people think they are because of this loss. Yeah, and they had a much better second half than first half. Texas kind of went into cruise control a little bit and didn't try and add on. And Wink Martindale did well. He adjusted his defense, and they came out and made it tougher for Texas to move the ball in the second half. So yeah, it wasn't. I don't think it was quite as bad of a loss as people think it was. It's just whenever you can see 24 points before the half as Michigan, it's a tough one to come back from.
Well, it was a statement win for Texas, and obviously Michigan didn't have one of the key members of the coaching staff on the sideline. So we'll never know what the Connor Stallions effect might have been. Ollie, we know that Texas is back. We can say that with some certainty now. Is Nebraska back?
Well, they're back in the AP top 25, which is, an achievement. I don't think anyone would have seen that coming before the start of the season. I think it's with a team like Nebraska, I think you have to be careful to temper expectations, because it would be easy to get carried away. I've seen former guests of this podcast who are nationally renowned media people put Nebraska in the college football playoff in their recent bowl projections, and that's a let's have some clicks, but then the clicks are behind the paywall. Anyway, let's not get into that. I think that's just the situation where Nebraska's concerned, though, right? Yes, it's great to see them playing well. Like the defense against Colorado was awesome, but you've got to temper that with, we know Colorado's offensive line is awful. Like, they were awful against North Dakota State. They were awful against Nebraska. Nebraska's defense spent all afternoon in the backfield and harrying Shedeur Sanders. And I don't want it to come across as me saying that us three between us could spend all afternoon in the Colorado backfield, because there's a lot of talent on that Nebraska defense. But they will have certainly a lot tougher assignments to face this season, and that will be the true test as they get into some of those harder games. But Dylan Raiola looked awesome. Excuse me. The guys on the defense, they were just non-stop all night, and there's a lot of talent on that defense. But I think they're probably a team that outperforms preseason expectation, because I think probably most people thought Nebraska would be a 6-6 team this year, probably. So I think they outperformed those expectations. I think saying that Nebraska are going to go on a run in the Big Ten and potentially get to the college football playoff is the wildest of overreactions to 2 games of football that you'll probably see this year. But there's no doubt that there's no doubt that they're moving in the right direction. Matt Rule, for all his faults as an NFL coach, Matt Rule knows how to win college football games. He knows how to change the fortunes of a college football program, and they're certainly moving in the right direction. And they're doing so in all the right ways as well. They're doing well. He's allowing them to win in recruiting. He's allowing them to cherry pick some good guys from the transfer portal. So they're making up the roster the right way. So definitely a program that's trending in the right direction. Let's just temper how far that direction is towards the college football playoff by the end of this year.
Well, far be it from me to suggest that media members trying to coerce more than 4 Big Ten teams into the playoff, because that would never happen. But maybe there's something that we can ask about that in coming weeks. I guess what we won't know, and for a number of weeks now, actually, is how good that win over Colorado is going to be, right? I mean, I think our expectations on this podcast are that, well, to the extent of being blocked by Deion Sanders, is that Colorado's probably not going to be any great shakes this year. So if Colorado do go off a cliff, then that win doesn't look so look so great. Anyway, I'm conscious of time. I do want to get on to picks under 20 because we do want to do that. But before we do that, Oliver, let us talk about what on earth is happening on Chestnut Hill. What is going on? Bill O'Brien effect. I actually saw a tweet at the weekend, which was from an Alabama persuasion person to say, Bill O'Brien, come back, all is forgiven. That tells you all you need to know about what he's doing in Chestnut Hill. Tell us.
Wow. There was no overreaction. We talked about overreacting multiple times on this podcast already tonight. I think that's the overreaction. Look, it's a great story. But I'm thinking it falls under we don't know what we don't know yet, because the hype around Boston College right now is real in terms of there's an excitement. You can sense it from people who are in and around the program all the time. And there's no doubt that that is the Bill O'Brien effect. The win over Florida State, we don't know how good that win is because, Georgia Tech only just beat Florida State. They lost to Syracuse. We don't know. I think we'll have an idea of how good that Boston College win over Florida State is when Memphis play Florida State this coming weekend. And then as the game starts to stack up, you start to figure out. And this weekend, the Missouri game is a huge test of what is real and what isn't real around the program. What is true is they've got a star quarterback in Tom Castellanos. The defense is playing at a high level. There's some pieces that return this year who could have gone to the NFL, return this year, and they'll have far tougher tests than FSU and Duquesne as this year progresses. But defense looks good, offense looks good. So far, things look good. But this Missouri game will be a huge test of how good they are. And I don't think many people would have expected Boston College versus Missouri to be one of the only games this weekend that features two ranked teams. College game day certainly didn't, because they're going to Columbia to South Carolina against LSU. Missouri Boston College is arguably a better and bigger game. But not for the SEC, obviously, because there's only one SEC team involved in the game. So I think again, it's another one. You've got to temper expectations. We'll know exactly what we're dealing with on Chestnut Hill. Couple of games down the line.
So try not to get too overexcited. Right. Let's wrap up.
Let's get overexcited. Get the tickets under 20 quid on.
Tickets under 20. Right. So significant confusion over what the rules are. There are no rules other than don't talk about ticks under 20. We're limited in the dates this weekend, because I think there are only a handful of, if even, Thursday night games. So I guess the rules are ticket must be under $20, and you must be able to travel realistically between the venues. So if you're playing on a Thursday, but you must be able to not jump on a private plane, as our last guest wanted to do. What kind of podcast do you think this is? And if you are like Oliver and decide to try and fit in two games in the one day, then you have to be able to travel without challenging the speed of light to get to the game. So, notwithstanding that, the rules are now set. Who wants to go first? I guess it's going to be quick, I think, but
I feel like we need to save Oliver's craziness for second here. It's been cold and windy and grey and rainy today here in Essex, and there's one game that really jumps out to me. The on-field won't be much to watch, but it's probably the only thing I'm going to get for under $10 in Miami. So give me tickets to Ball State at Miami. I'm going to sit in the stands. I'm going to lap up the sunshine. there in Hard Rock Stadium, and kind of just chill and make sure that I can enjoy some sunshine before my season gets underway, and I'm stuck indoors all day. So
You can
um,
be sat in the stands drinking frozen margaritas with your
yeah,
Hawaiian shirt on.
and then I can just sit there and chill out, and know that I haven't got to concentrate too much on the events on the field, because it's probably going to be over inside the first quarter and a half, maybe, of the game. So it's an interesting one, but it's a place I've never been as well, which is something that I'm interested in taking advantage of. I know it's not the true idea of Ticks under 20, but maybe
So
if we go and get it done, then
it's
that's
all
what we'll
about
do.
the experience. You belong on Ocean Drive, Alex. You belong there. I want to challenge the. I can't believe that it's $4 to go to Mississippi State. I feel as if we've missed out a one or a zero somewhere. But if it is, then let's go to Davis Wade. The other, just before, because we're building Oliver up to his big entrance, because he's managed to concoct 4,000 miles or something. The other team that we didn't talk about in the main part of the podcast was Illinois. And they've been catching people's attention thus far. So, but to Alex's point, I have no desire to go anywhere cold. So I'm going to stay in the southern states, and I'm going to go to Start Vegas, which I think might be the second time in 2 weeks that Start Vegas has been picked. So now Oliver has got his travel math out, and he's worked out just how many thousand miles he can get to.
Really annoying because the Saturday slate is such that you can't get to two games on Saturday, really. But you can start on Thursday night. You can start at Arizona State, at Texas State, and San Marcos. Because I think that's going to be a great game. Because Texas State is arguably one of the best Group of Five teams around right now. Under GJ Kinney last year, and they looked awesome. They bring in Jordan McLeod at quarterback this year. That Texas State team has got some absolute ballers on defense. Ben Bell is a guy that people should get on their radars if they've not been watching Texas State over the last couple of years. The guy's an absolute freak. And Arizona State is better than expected 2 games into the season. The team is really playing for Kenny Dillingham, and their running back Cameron Scatterbo is an incredible force of nature in all phases of the game. So I think Arizona State at Texas State and San Marcos on a Thursday night absolutely sign me the hell up for that. And then the temptation is to spend all day driving Friday and meet up with Alex in Miami. A 20-hour drive is all it is from those two venues, and we've got all day Friday to do it. But it's tempting, and also
How many hours are in Friday, Oliver? If you've got a 20-hour drive, how many hours
24, George. You know exactly how many hours are in a day. 24, and we're going to set off. We're going to set off late Thursday night, and we've still got till like lunchtime Saturday to get there. It's
So
a piece of piss.
3:30 start in Miami. So you've
I
Yeah,
extra hours in
exactly.
there.
Absolute piece of piss. We're not
I
going to do that.
I know Ollie loves the whole 24-hour Le Mans thing, but 24 hours driving from game to game is just
Easy, absolutely easy, George. You need to get some stamina, man. The the FAU and
that is
FIU
yes.
game as well is also one that would be worthwhile making a 6-year long drive to get to. But we won't do that. We won't do that. I'm going to stay in Texas, and it'll be Texas Tech, North Texas on the Saturday. Texas Tech got off to a dreadful start to the season. I think Joey Maguire is a guy who, if they're not careful, could be under pressure. And it's not long since that Texas Tech were being talked about as a team that could be up there and consistently challenging in the Big 12. They've had an awful start to the season. North Texas will have an up and down start, but you're going to see, I don't know, 80 points in that game probably. Either way, it doesn't matter who scores them. It doesn't matter one side or not one sided. You're going to see points in that game. Let's do it. Let's stay in Texas and just take it all in.
Very good. we'll make it next week so that you can get 17 games in over the course of the weekend.
If you could, that'd be great.
I would have thought if football wasn't your primary mission, then the Florida Atlantic going to Boca Raton for the weekend wouldn't have been the worst place to have. I'm disappointed that Alex went for the obvious Miami and not went to Boca Raton. He's slipping in his old age. Anyway, on that happy note, that's all from us on this episode. I hope you enjoyed the meanderings and nonsense of three so-called college football experts. Please, if you could, you can watch and listen to all of our previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, and now you can watch them on YouTube. But if you haven't already, please can you subscribe and if you feel the need to review, but subscribe would help us out greatly. You can also follow us on X and Instagram. Our social media accounts are at College Chaps and the College Chaps on YouTube, so please give us a follow. Thanks to our expert panel of Alex Nolly for the brilliant input. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.